Hey everyone, the Mentalist here, and today's topic is Sagittas, the legendary emotional management Draconic Knights.
Well, get on with it.
Do you know what's in my hand? The key to unlocking the secret of the legendary dragons!
What?
You heard me. Legend of Heart!
Each individual has preferences in managing fear, shame, and anger. The way an individual navigates these three core emotions creates a unique signature through the emotional calibration system, which I call Sagittas, ancient Greek for arrows. This system determines how each person preferentially responds to core psychological pressures. I call the emotional management components of Sagittas as follows: Phomaeus for fear, Hermidos for shame, and Critoros for anger. The legendary emotional management Draconic Knights are here.
I give up 1,000 life points and remove my obnoxious Celtic guardian from the field!
Gather round, duelists. Today we summon the mighty Phomaeus, Hermidos and Critoros, the legendary Draconic Knights who watch over how we handle fear, shame, and anger. With respect to the OG, credit goes to Yu-Gi-Oh! For the iconic trio of Timaeus, Hermos, and Critias. Enter the emotional arena. Sagittas is awoken.
This lets me summon legendary dragons in their true form! Finally, we've been set free!
No, not them!
Phomaeus, Fear Management, Sword of Insight. Phomaeus is the emotional management component of Sagittas that deals with fear by the means of different strategies. Chōrismós, the dissection of fear into analyzable parts, allowing detachment through intellectual compartmentalization of emotion as a means to prevent emotional overwhelm and being intruded upon. This is the primitive root of isolation defensive mechanism primarily used by Type 5 in the Enneagram. Exanáthesis, the outsourcing of inner fear to external authorities or systems in an effort to find security through allegiances and our entering. This is the primitive root of projection defensive mechanism primarily used by Type 6 in the Enneagram. Metaschēmatismós, the reframing of fearful realities into more palatable narratives, transforming discomfort into optimism from shifting perception. This is the primitive root of rationalization defensive mechanism primarily used by Type 7 in the Enneagram. Hermidos, shame management, sword of resonance. Hermidos is the emotional management component of Sagittas that deals with shame by the means of Stási, the suppression of personal needs and desires to avoid shame and maintain connection with others by creating a healthful personal image. This is the primitive root of repression defensive mechanism primarily used by Type 2 in the Enneagram. Hypokrisis, the role-taking of social masks to protect oneself from shame by modeling competence and success. This is the primitive root of identification defensive mechanism primarily used by Type 3 in the Enneagram. Enchysis, the infusion of values and ideals of others, especially those admired by the individual, to forge a unique personal image that both embraces and struggles with shame. This is the primitive root of introjection defensive mechanism primarily used by Type 4 in the Enneagram. Critoros, anger management, sword of resolve. Critoros is the emotional management component of Sagittas that deals with anger by the means of Apórripsis, the dismissal of vulnerable feelings to maintain strength in the face of anger, characterized by an aggressive versus preferential anxious response. This is the primitive root of denial defensive mechanism primarily used by type 8 in the Enneagram. Amblýnsis, the numbing of anger to detach from inner conflict and external stress, characterized by a withdrawn aggressive, cool, preferential action response. This is the primitive root of narcotization defensive mechanism primarily used by type 9 in the Enneagram. Antídrasis, the counteraction to anger and unwanted impulses in general to uphold highly responsible ethical standards, characterized by compliant aggressive, resent, preferential action response. This is the primitive root of reaction formation defensive mechanism primarily used by type 1 in the Enneagram. And similarly with Prothalos, the individual will develop respective plus, equal, minus association due to nurturing effects with each default mechanism in Sagittas component, which they don't have to match necessarily the ones in Prothalos, albeit often they will match. When someone is versus Ike, cool Ike, or resent Ike, the individual is fully possessed by the Hindbrain, with anger management taking chief predominance, strongly correlating with the Enneagram gut types, which are at first. In all other cases, anger management is subdued to varying degrees, allowing fear or shame management to take primary control, which strongly correlates with Ad or Earth types in the Enneagram respectively. From an Enneagram standpoint, the emotional calibration system was partially identified by Oscar H. Hazo with trifix, fixation only, and more comprehensively by Catherine Cherny-Faubre with tri-type, a full system integrating all three centers into a unique triple focus. In Hekatior, I emphasize chiefly the action-oriented aspect of Sagittas, which is strongly linked to Critoros, as this focus was necessary for the trialification of Jung's work. However, for a deeper investigation into the management of fear, shame and anger, I strongly encourage you to check out Tri-Type by my friend Catherine Cherny-Faubre in her official website, catherinefaubre.com, linked in the description. And feel free to check out Hekatior, my theoretical expansion of Jung's work for the modern psyche. More info in my Hekatior wiki, linked in the description. Stay tuned for more.